My name is Perveen Sarwar, and this is my story for Colourful Heritage. I grew up in Lossiemouth, and we were the only Asian family. And our evenings were my father, Ghulam Mohammed, telling us how he came to Britain, how difficult it was at that time. I remember him telling me that he had one sister, one elder brother and a younger brother. He was the only one that was educated because the elder brother, they had land and he was a farmer. And the younger brother also was more interested in farming. And my father then travelled with my pupad and they arrived in Glasgow. That was before the Second World War. And before the partition of Pakistan and India, my father came from Jalandhar. He arrived in Glasgow. He didn't like Glasgow very much. He then moved to Dundee. He didn't like Dundee very much. He stayed about 6 months. Then he moved on to Banff. And then from Banff, he moved on to Seatown, which is now called Lossiemouth. And there he met this woman called Mrs. McCulloch. And I remember when I arrived, I used to call her Gran, because she was very much like a mother to my father. He did door-to-door business from a suitcase. Then after 3-4 years, he returned to Jalandhar in India and started building a home. And they were halfway through building the home when the wars took place between India and Pakistan, and then they had to leave and make their way across the border. My gran, I remember my father telling me, she had one blanket, a duvet, and she had put the money, the belongings, the money that they had inside that, reside inside that blanket, and stitched it, and they carried that across with them, and some silver jewelry that they had. My gran then passed away on the way to Pakistan, and they carried her for some distance because they didn't want to leave her body. They then dug a grave and they buried her. And then when they arrived in Punjab, they were together at the beginning, and when my father found out that he only had 2 weeks left on his visa to expire on his passport, they then told the family that they were just going to do the daily shopping, and my Chachu put my father on the ship to make his way back to Britain. And my mother was pregnant at that time with my elder brother and my elder sister. They were twins. And the first picture my father got from my mother was of the children when they were about 6 months old. And that was the first time he actually seen the children, was in a photograph. And at that time you could sponsor your family and get them to join you. So at the age of 6, I then joined my father in Lossiemouth. We lived in King Street, Lossiemouth, in a detached house with a garden. There was one coal fire, and it was very much the coal fire that sort of heated the house. And there was a shed at the bottom of the garden. And I remember my mother going down with the bucket, and she would go down in the morning and she would bring the coal. She would clean out the fire, and then she would put the coal fire on. I went to school in Lossiemouth High School. I was the only Muslim girl in school. I didn't know a word of English the day I arrived in school, and there were 2 girls that lived next door to us. They would come and take me to school in the morning, and they would bring me back in the evening. And there was a local cinema on a Saturday, and my father would have the girls from next door to take us and go and see the movies, the cartoons and everything, so that we could improve our English. And I remember that this van used to come, and it was a grocery van, and it would park outside our house, and my mother would go out and she would just pick all the things up that she wanted to buy, and she would take the money out of her purse and just put it on her hand and have the man take whatever the amount was, because my mother wasn't very familiar. But my father, when he came home in the evening, he would then go through and tell my mother what the money was, that if you were to pay this much, this is how much change you would get. So we had lessons from our father on the value of money and how to do maths and how to purchase different items. My father would not let us speak English in the house. Our mother tongue was Punjabi, and so he made us speak Punjabi in the house. When I arrived home, my father told me that I had to take my school uniform off and I had to dress in my traditional clothes. I learned to read the Quran from my father, my sister and my brothers. I learned to read the namaz from the family. At that time, there was no newspaper, but my father would pay news agents in Glasgow, and for them for a whole year, and they would then post out, I think it was the Mashriq newspaper. They would post that newspaper out to my father, which was published, I think, every week, and my father would then read that paper. And I remember him telling us, the various things that were happening, whether it was in Pakistan or India or anything happening in Glasgow, where most of the community stayed at that time. I even remember him reading out recipes to my mother, and saying that we could try this different recipe. So it was very much a close family. My father then purchased a bigger house. He purchased a shop, and my father no longer did the door-to-door business, and we run that business as a family, that we all had a rota, that we had to put in so many hours after school in the weekend, and it was very much a family business. Maybe when I was in primary 5, that was my first experience that I suffered racism. I remember one of my girls in my class, her telling me that her mother didn't want her speaking to me because I would be a bad influence on her because I was a different religion from her. And I, that age, didn't really understand what she meant, but she would still speak to me and I would still speak to her. And I remember walking to school one day and she tripped and fell, and I helped her to school. And when we got to the school, we were 10 minutes late, and the bell had rang and all the children had gone inside. And the headmaster, saw the both of us, but I was the one that got the row. I was the one that was told that, you must have held her up and you must have been a bad influence. I became very close to my father right through my teens, right through until I got married. Everything that I wanted to do, everything that took place in my life, I had to have that conversation with my father. He was my role model. He was my hero, and because I'd lived away from him for so long. And then when the Second World War started, it was very much the tokens that were given, and you would have to give so many tokens in order to purchase whatever you wanted. And I remember my father saying that he sometimes, if somebody had 1 or 2 less tokens, he would then give them that item and then they would give him those tokens the next time. My father taught me how to do cashier, how to do bookkeeping, how to work in the shop. Because in the weekends we would work in the shop and we were paid for the work that we did, because my father made sure that it was very important to have a job. It was very important to make sure that you knew where the money was coming from. You knew how to save. You knew how to invest. Because my father told me when Sarwar and I got married that if you earn £100, you invest £90 and you only spend £10 if you want to be successful. And that was the advice that we took. Even to this day, when I'm working in Pakistan, when I talk, when I go to any university or anything that I'm doing, I remember the words that my father taught me at that time, to always be proud of who you are, always be proud of your roots, and never forget where you came from, and never be ashamed of your parents, because it's your parents who made those sacrifices, who went without to make sure that they provided for the family. And it's those very values that we need to hold on to, and it's those very values that help me do what I'm doing now. So my rishta was done, I was Timari Sarwar Sahab, And luckily for me, 6 months later, the legislation was passed by the Labour Party that anybody could sponsor their fiancé and they could join them in the UK. And because I had been working and I had been paying my tax, I was able to sponsor Sarwar Sahab, and he came and joined me. And when he arrived, we got married in the Church of Scotland. My bridesmaid was Leslie, my best friend, and the minister then performed, and I got married there. And then the Hafiz had also travelled, because there was no Hafiz anywhere near Elgin, Aberdeen, so the Hafiz had travelled from Glasgow, who then performed my nikah. So when I first got married, my husband and I worked in a local shop, and the only money that we took out was for the bills and the money that for the housekeeping, and we all had like £5 for pocket money. And out of that £5, when Sarwar and I got married, £250 was spent for his driving lesson, and the other £250 used to go into the cinema because there was nothing else to do, and that was a break. And that is what I try to install in my children, that it is very easy to buy designer. It is very easy to think that we need to invest, but until we invest into the business, until we make sure that the business is doing well, and then according to the profit that you make or according to how much money you have, it is always better to make sure that you have a strong background and a strong business before you think of purchasing anything. I couldn't get a hold of the doctor when my father got ill. He was ill a few days earlier. The doctor came to see him, and to me my father seemed okay. He sat up with us, he went to bed, and my father then said to me, I want you to open the wardrobe and I want to give you a lump sum of money, because I wanted to buy you a car. I wanted to do more for you, but at that time I wanted to make sure that you and Sarwar Sahab had settled, and that you were doing well as a family, and I wanted to give you that lump sum of money later. And I remember saying to my father that the jewellery that you gave me, I have put it in a locker, and the money that you gave me that I had saved up, we have put it into the business, and I don't need anything else from you. And I saw the smile in my father's face. Soon after, my father had the heart attack. He wasn't feeling well. I ran downstairs to try to get a hold of the doctor. I couldn't get a hold of the doctor. The doctor was on call. My brothers arrived and my mother, we were all in the room. And I was very much holding on to my father. And I remember my father taking the last breath and passing away in my arms. There was nowhere to bathe him. We had to remove one of the doors and put that door on top of the bath. And then my brothers did the ghusl. And then we ordered the coffin, and the coffin came, and my father was buried, and it was the Hafiz from Glasgow that did the funeral. When I first moved to Glasgow, we lived in Maryhill Road, Quarter Street. It was a council house, and then from there we moved to Kerr Street. I remember going across to the school in Kerr Street and asking the headmaster if I could start a mothers and toddlers group, because I found that there wasn't enough communication between the ethnic minority and the indigenous community. I then knocked on the neighbours' doors and got the woman to come, and we started this mother and toddlers group. For me, it was a way of trying to integrate. It was for me trying to get communities together so that we could understand one another. When I started that group, I made lots of friends. It was easy to go out in the morning or even go as a group to the park together, and I think it's very important to have that for your children when they are growing up, to have friends in every area, to have friends in every religion, to make sure that they respect one another. My mother, she passed away in Glasgow, and according to her wishes, she is buried next to my father in Lossiemouth. Growing up, I always considered myself as a British Muslim because I feel that this is my country. I grew up here. We worked hard. We contributed in any way that we could. Currently, I am working in women empowerment. I am the vice chair of Sarwar Foundation. I am the founder of Hunarga, which is skill development in rural areas for our underprivileged sisters in order for them to obtain a skill and to be able to earn and live with respect.